things seem to be escalating in LA, in Chicago, in Portland as well. I've got some updates for you on some of those cities. And Trump is saying that he is now going to go into other cities in addition to the ones that he has already surged federal agents into. Let's take a listen to that.
We're just at the start. We're going to go into other cities that we're not talking about purposely. We're getting ready to go in. And when they go in, like Cash as an example, told me that people didn't even know. 5 months ago, they went into Chicago and they started doing a lot of work in Chicago. And we brought the numbers down a little bit. And but that really was just preparatory work for what we're going to do with the surge. We're going to have a surge of strong, good people, patriots, and they're going to go in, they straighten it all out. Didn't get elected. I did get elected for crime, but I didn't get elected for what we're doing. This is many, many steps above. And I want to thank Stephen Miller, who's right back in the audience right there. I'd love to have him. I love watching him on television. I'd love to have him come up and explain his true feelings, but maybe not his truest feelings. That might be going a little bit too far. But Stephen, thank you for doing an unbelievable job. And the people of this country love you, I'll tell you. And they love what you say about crime and stopping crime.
So some interesting comments there about Stephen Miller. Previously, Trump had said something about like, oh, you would just want everybody to look like you in this country. So he maybe doesn't want those truest feelings from Stephen Miller being expressed.
I don't think we should all want to look like Stephen Miller, and no offense, but just saying.
You can say it with offense. But the noteworthy part there, obviously, the biggest news is that he's planning more of these searches of federal agents into other cities. And we've got an update. This is significant out of LA. So that city has just voted to declare a state of emergency as a result of the ICE raids and everything that's going on there. Let's take a listen to that.
LA County has declared a state of emergency over the immigration raids. The Board of Supervisors voted today. Board members say the raids are preventing people from going to work and forcing some businesses to close. The emergency allows the board to look at enacting an eviction moratorium and other protections for people impacted by the raids.
So this is a city where roughly a third of the population is immigrants, the largest undocumented population in the country. This sort of designation is typically used for like natural disasters, but they feel like the economic and societal tumult is enough to justify it here. I think there was only one dissenter on the board who voted against this.
Yeah, I don't know. I looked into this and I honestly find it a bit crazy. So the state of emergency, as I understand it, allows the city to provide an eviction moratorium specifically because they don't want to release immigration status in a court. And in fact, some of the times LA County is funneling, they said, this is not exactly confirmed because the reporting out of Los Angeles is very sketchy, but some of it includes rent specifically, not just eviction moratorium, but rent relief for people, which I think would go to people who are here illegally, which I honestly find a bit insane. So that seems to be part of the city. I mean, I cannot imagine living in the city of Los Angeles, probably one of the most expensive cities in the world, probably in the United States at least, where your effective tax rate is going to be some 50% if you're making over $100,000, $200,000 a year. And then a significant portion of your tax dollars are going to illegal relief. I mean, look, it's your money. I guess you guys can do what you want, and that seems to be politically the ways that you want to go. But I don't know. I don't think it's particularly like a winning message for Democratic cities and counties, like in terms of their prioritization. That's immediately like what I was able to see. It's also kind of gives the game away. It's like you're so reliant on illegal labor that you literally just state of emergency if you take away all your labor.
Well,
so
I think there's a few things that I would say to that. I mean, I have no idea what the polling is. I suspect that there's probably widespread support since you had widespread support on the council, and I suspect there's widespread support. There's widespread rejection in the city of the escalation in ICE raids and ICE tactics. And so a few things I would say about that. I mean, number one, undocumented immigrants do by and large pay taxes into the city. So it is some of their money as well.
Okay.
Number two, a third of the population are immigrants. And it's not just undocumented immigrants that are being impacted here. As we've discussed here, you've got Kavanaugh stops. So basically anyone who's Latino can be harassed. You've had some instances of people being fined for not having their papers, even though they were citizens, being fined for not having their papers to prove their citizenship. And then the other thing I would say, so it's not just undocumented immigrants who would be impacted and, eligible potential for relief. You also have a mass sort of societal tumult in LA that has been likely very impactful in terms of their economy. And you have a lot of mixed status families. So if you have U.S. citizen, this is very common, U.S. citizen kids, undocumented parents, they're unable to go to work because they're afraid of getting picked up by ICE. Now you've got a situation where the whole family is going to be evicted. And what happens if they're evicted? Well, then you have more of a burden on social services. You have more of a burden on shelters. So, I think there's a sense that, well, if we can keep them in their apartments, that actually could save money for the city long term, because then we're not having this increased burden on our social services.
This is kind of like reducing it, though, a little bit, where, like, at the end of the day, I think this is kind of how you get here, where you have a system that's architected literally for illegal labor. And you have an entire city of Los Angeles where, I mean, look, let's be honest, like if we have to declare a state of emergency because illegals can't come to work, what does that tell you about the economy of one of the richest places in the United States? And this is the part where, a lot of these leftists and liberals, they just never grapple with this. Like, should we really have a city of effective slave labor so that you can have your villa where you get a DoorDash $25 burrito delivered to you by an illegal immigrant? I mean, remember we argued about this on a farm. They were like, oh, children have been swept up in farm. Why are children on farms? Why are these illegal children on a farm? You people never cared about that when you're smoking your toke from your cannabis retail store, which gives you your little rewards program and your high potency THC.
Appreciate
when
you
you're
finding
ordering.
A way to bring it back to weed, Saagar.
It was at a weed farm. Krystal, it was at a weed farm. I didn't just shoehorn it in there.
So let me just say that, this is, we've had these debates many times. That's why I believe that people should be brought out of the shadows so they cannot be exploited. I think your concerns about, the exploitation of undocumented labor are entirely justified. I just come down a very different place in terms of what the solution is.
This is how we
but
got
I will
here.
also say, Saagar, that it has and we'll show some more clips here, but it is not just undocumented immigrants who are fearful right now. In fact, there are a lot of people even, with legal status or who are, going through the asylum process or who are green card holders. Like, no one is exempt from this. And so the fear and the disruption in their life and the potential inability to go to work, all of those things are not just with the undocumented community. It's far more widespread. And yes, LA is a city of immigrants. I mean, like I said, it was roughly a third of the population who are immigrants who are potentially impacted by this. And that Supreme Court decision that says you don't need any excuse to stop people other than them just basically being brown, makes it so that the fear and the impact is much more widespread than it would otherwise be.
I'll grant you that. That's the cleanest hit that the left has got right now. And they're not wrong. But part of the reason I wanted to focus on that LA stuff is because I'm like, that's how you got here, okay? You created a political system where for a lot of us, it feels like you have the entire liberal city focus is on criminals, making sure that they can get away with as much crime as possible, and on making sure illegals are apparently treated as everyday citizens. I'll give you a perfect example here in Washington, D.C. You remember the whole big balls mugging, which justified the National Guard? Guess what happened to those two teens who mugged them? Probation. Nothing. No jail time, nothing going after him. The DC people just let him right out of there. That's how you get to the National Guard deployment. It's like you have to grapple with failed governance and with priorities. You live in the richest city, literally one of the richest cities in the history of the world, where you have 10% of the people there who are there illegally. You have to tacitly admit that your skyrocketing price and everything is not capable without your slave labor from Guatemala. And then the only possible solution you come to is pathway to citizenship. That is why people freak out, people like me. I'll give you an example of who's the founder of Reddit. I think his name is Alexis something. I forget his name. But he made a long post about ICE and everything. He's like, my family, we're undocumented. And he goes, instead of these ICE raids, that's why we need a pathway to citizenship. And it just strikes me again, it's like, if your only option for many of us is amnesty or this shit, a lot of people are gonna choose this shit, because even in a pathway to citizenship, for example, there will come a time where many of the people who don't qualify, what happens to them? Are they gonna leave willingly? They have to be deported somehow. Sometimes we're gonna have to go and find them. Are you ever gonna support that? No, we know the answer. They don't support law enforcement removing illegals from the country.
You're making it such a binary choice.
It actually was in the election, though. It really was.
I don't think so, Saagar, because, I mean, listen, to me it was, right? To me it was. When I saw mass deportation now, I'm not going to say I knew it would be Black Hawk helicopters raiding an apartment building in the middle of the night and zip tying naked children. Okay, I'm not going to say I knew that. I knew it would be something approaching. I mean, Trump talked about the insurrection, like invoking the Insurrection Act.
Yes.
But there is a balance that could be struck between ICE absolute terror reign in a variety of cities and targeting blue cities in particular in blue states because you don't like the politicians who are there.
That is where the vast majority of the illegals are too, because they created sanctuary cities.
And total impunity for these guys who are assaulting, again, American citizens, right, who are assaulting legal immigrants, who are racially profiling anyone who looks brown, running around in masks and terrorizing entire cities. Like, there is a way of doing some immigration enforcement that doesn't look like that.
Yeah, but we did have that.
But hold on.
Oh, sorry.
This is what I find frustrating about your analysis. I know how you feel about immigration, okay? But I feel that there is such a heightened level of scrutiny and expectation on one side, and then a total lack of accountability. Like the upset over the way that the Trump administration has conducted themselves, you just want to blame it's the liberals' fault. It's Biden's fault. It's Newsom's fault. It's Karen Bass's fault. Like, these are grown human beings who control all of the government. They have responsibility for their own decisions. You can't just always blame liberals for what the fuck they're doing.
I think that is entirely fair, but I would compare it to, are you capable of talking about illegal immigrant crime without contextualizing it in the broader picture? Not really.
What do you mean?
Well, okay, so if I was if we talk about, let's say, the Lake and Riley case or any of that, every time we do, it always has to come back to, but actually, statistically, it's a bigger picture, and it's America's fault that they're coming from Guatemala anyway, and actually they commit less crimes than whites, and that's why they're better citizens. Or
here, are you ready?
No.
Criminal illegal immigrants should be deported. Are you happy?
Of course, it's not about.
It's not hard to say, Saagar.
I know
you can
that.
say it. I can say it very directly.
I think
that is not what these people are doing. They are doing the opposite of that.
What?
In fact, we have an element here later in the show. The apartment building raid.
Yes.
They are claiming one Trinidad member. The vast majority of the people that are picking up have no criminal records. The amount of drug trafficking and human trafficking convictions are down. They are doing the opposite of going after undocumented criminals, illegal criminals, okay? So, if the goal is let's get out the bad people, they are completely failing at that.
I grant you that. I grant you that entirely. What I'm saying is about a political dynamic of which we were entered in. Now, you talked about that there's a middle way. We had 4 years of the so-called middle way where 8 to 10 million people entered the country illegally. That was just as insane and lawless. It only wasn't because you agree with the policy and you want to give them citizenship. For many of us, we reject that. We say, actually, that's a violation of immigration law. That is a violation of the border, violation of our sovereignty as a country itself. And yes, many people saw that as ridiculous, as lawless, as out of control. And they gave us the option. We had to choose between that and this. And the majority of the people did choose at least some version of this.
Are rejecting this now.
Okay, but we don't live in government by poll immediately. So then Biden should have just been thrown out of office with the border?
I live a very privileged life, right?
Yeah, so do I. Let's put that on the table too.
I have owned my own home. Yeah. I'm doing fine, right? So let's think about the people who were both directly impacted by undocumented immigrants coming in and who are now directly impacted by what the Trump administration is doing, okay? The people in that apartment building in Chicago, okay? There were definitely undocumented immigrants there, all right?
Yes.
And if you talk to the residents, they have been far more traumatized by what was done to them by this government than by any of the undocumented immigrants who were there in that apartment building. So if you're just talking directly
but you're talking about that one apartment building.
About the people who have been directly affected both by undocumented immigration and by a fascist crackdown in their city, helicopter raid, all of this insanity, there is no doubt that they would much rather have the undocumented immigrants in their building than their whole life turned upside down, their children dragged out of their beds and traumatized in the middle of the night.
That seems very reductive because you're pointing to that one apartment building. I could probably find 10 apartment buildings where people have said that illegals have come in with crime. I mean, actually, literally where I live, there's very nearby, there's public housing projects where they're having problems with MS-13. And I actually even asked one of them, I said, what's the issue? She said, we got all these Venezuelan migrants who've been coming in and breaking into people's cars.
Yeah, so then ask them if they would like, in response to that, to have their apartment getting raided in the middle of the night and their children pulled out in the street and zip-tied and thrown U-Haul vans and harassed on the street all day.
I'm giving you the prospect of they're also upset about the former, which is how we got to the latter. Now, I'm not justifying what the Trump administration is doing, but similarly in the way that we talk about illegal crime, or at least any liberal has talked about illegal crime, we have to look at it in the context of how we got here. Like, there's no way, I know this for a fact, having debated immigration with liberals now for over a decade, they are literally constitutionally incapable of talking about illegal immigration without, oh, but America messed up Guatemala or whatever in the 1980s, and that's why it's our fault that all these people came over here. It's not possible.
Okay,
of course we can look at stuff in the context.
A bit of a point. I mean, we're just talking about Venezuela, right? We're just talking about Venezuela, where we might do a regime change, where we have massive sanctions that have, it's not the only reason, but it's a big part of immiserating the population.
Sure.
I mean, it seems to me like that's actually a very important part of the conversation because people don't want to have to leave they want to be able to stay in their homes.
I don't agree with that.
So no, it's absolutely the case.
Over a billion people around the world would come to America.
Even in a place like Venezuela, that is, where things are not good and haven't been good for a while, it's not like everyone is leaving. People prefer generally to stay where they're from. The migrants pushed down to Syria, like they don't want to have to go to these European countries. We interviewed that Palestinian, now Australian doctor, Dr. Mo, who grew up in the UK. And kids would be like, go back to where you're coming from. He's like, I literally can't. Like, I would love to go back to Palestine. I would love to not be a refugee, but I literally can't. So I don't think that there's any problem with discussing those root causes.
But that's why I don't think there's a problem in talking about the incentive structure and the border.
I hear you, but Saagar, what I get frustrated with is it's every time. It's not it's always trying to deflect blame from the Trump administration onto something that some liberal did that you didn't like, whenever or wherever. And it's like, at a certain point, can we just say, you know what, this is really unacceptable, and I don't care what came before. This is inexcusable. This is unacceptable, and we should be outraged at the way their rights are being violated, at the way our rights are being violated, at the denial of due process, at the fact that we can just have mass racial profile, at the fact that these communities are being terrorized. Like, why can't we just have a direct condemnation without all this, like, well, actually, but it's the liberals' fault?
Because I just don't really think that exists when we talk about illegal crime or when we talk about any of these other problems that illegals cause. It's like nobody's getting,
So because you don't like the way liberals talk about immigration, you can't just condemn the Trump administration for what they're doing
Don't you think it's kind of emotional blackmail in a way? Like, did we, for the last 4 years, just cover every single illegal rape in the country and completely for what it was? Like, no, because I think honestly that would be ridiculous. I think this is basically the inverse of that, where it's like, oh, we have to condemn this one specific thing. We can't talk about the broader context. The broader context matters. The body politic actually did vote in a very specific way on this. Now, maybe they're feeling differently now. We don't live in government by poll fiat, where immediately, like, if that were the case, then we should have said, fuck Biden, let's get him out of here 9 months into the election.
I think your point would be reasonable if we're talking about one-offs, but we're talking about a whole government policy, which is also not really about immigration. It's partly about immigration, but it's not really about immigration. This is about trying to create a one-party state. This is about this is 100% the case. I mean, if you look at, we didn't get this into this show because it just broke yesterday. They're now trying to turn the IRS into an investigation of any of their political opponents. They want to go after George Soros's Open Societies Foundation. They want to try to criminalize basically donating to any sort of left causes. You have NSPM 7, which is meant to target anyone who is critical of like the right or Trump, et cetera. You have them denying visas to people because they said the wrong thing about Charlie Kirk. We're going to talk to David Sirota about these Supreme Court cases. They're trying to consolidate. They are going for the whole thing. They're trying to consolidate control. And part of that is the militarized response, both with the National Guard, but also with these federal agents in the streets of these cities, which they are only expanding. So yes, it's important to talk about what that actually looks like on the ground. And it's also really important when the government lies to you about what's happening to be able to expose the truth. They're trying to provoke these direct confrontations because they want to use it, and again, we know this from reporting, to invoke the Insurrection Act, which will give them an even freer hand. And this is not just about immigrants. This is about all of our rights. And I think that is abundantly clear.
I said that's the cleanest hit that they've got, and that obviously is where they're out of control. I'm not really disputing a lot of your critique of the way that the Trump administration has carried this out. I really am not. What I am trying to get to is Look, I mean, I think you're off base with the one-party state thing. I think quite a lot of this is either theater, or in many cases, it's like designed to placate like specific political constituencies. I mean, we can't cover the way that we've hap-handedly done the world's worst trade war and then also say that this is the most, that this is some like hyper-efficient party state which is capable of takeover. But also
whether they're able to be successful or not is a different question of what they're trying to do.
But let me just take it back. Again, because specific to your critique is baked in like a liberal acceptance, let's say, of the Voting Rights Act. I read a lot about that, and we're going to talk about that with Sirota. It's like, should race really qualify as part of gerrymandering because of some interpretation of the 1965 Voting Rights Act? In my opinion, based on everything I've read, and specifically agreement and critiques of the Civil Rights Act, I would say no. I actually think it's a violation of the way that we were originally supposed to apportionment. It's just only baked in to the post-liberal cause that race itself should be an identity issue. Now, will it be bad for Democrats? Yeah, I don't really care about that. I mean, wouldn't really care because it's a principal issue for me. You disagree? That's fine. Well, I'm trying to take it
I'll save that more of that conversation for a moment. But what we're talking about is taking an area that is majority black and then dividing it like a pinwheel to make sure that they have no representation. And yes, I think that's wrong. And I think that means that those
but then
people
just lumping them all in one place.
Those people are being denied political representation. And so I think that's a problem.
It's a racial carve out for political representation. I'm only getting to implicit in all of this is a literal liberal bias where you see one as equal, not as more lawless than another. You have to accept that, if we all want to live together, many of us saw what happened under the Biden administration as actually lawless insanity and as a literal last chance, which is why many people voted for Trump. And that theory pervades the current United States government in their view of immigration specifically. Now, I'm not going to say for National Guard or for any of that, because I actually do think that's kind of a separate issue, even though I know that you think it is the same. In general, on this issue, if the fact is, if we are so far apart, that, again, for the binary is literal amnesty for all of them, 20, 25 million, or deportation, many of us are going to choose deportation. We just simply are. Because that does seem to me the binary, when the liberal elite and others are all saying that this is the only other acceptable solution. For many people, that is a genuine threat. And I don't think that the liberals grasp that it's an actual red line in the same way that maybe this is a red line for you. And I don't begrudge anybody. If you're liberal and you want to go out and make this your number one issue, you have the absolute right as an American. You should try and convince people. In my opinion, you're probably winning right now because most people see lawlessness and chaos in the same way they saw under Biden. And I think the cleanest hit that you guys have is that this is a violation of our rights as Americans, which to me is kind of nice because it's like we finally get to talk about us being as Americans. But one of the things that drives me crazy is the conflation of the two, and specifically saying there might as well be citizens itself. That's why, honestly, I'll say it. I still have a really hard time with always trying to have a look at like, a violation of this, and that. And it's like, it's so crazy to me that you can literally cross our border illegally, take money, take a job, go live in our housing, expect like the full, rights of the U.S. Constitution, of the government and all that other people to protect you. I understand after talking with Glenn why it has to be that way, so I accept it. But intellectually, I struggle with it. It doesn't seem right to me that you can break our laws, that you can enter here illegally, that in my opinion, you can take and actually, not do so much benefit to our country, and that we have to roll the red carpet out for you just to send you back from where you came from. It's nuts, in my opinion.
Well, even if you feel that way.
No, I've said I accept that the law has to be the way that it is.
But no, I really do. Even if you feel that way, the reality of like due process, is the perfect example here. If you don't have due process, you don't even get, if you're a citizen getting caught up in this, to prove you're a citizen. And that's where we are.
I think it's fair. It's true.
Where we are now.
It's true.
I mean, we have a number of instances of American citizens. I think it was the day I was with, maybe it was the day I would cover with Emily, but the guy who was going to work, American Army veteran. And they busted open the windshield in his car, sprayed him with pepper spray, took him, held him for days, wasn't allowed a phone call, wasn't allowed to call his lawyers, was put on suicide watch, was not allowed, he was covered in pepper spray, was, being like burned by this pepper spray, not allowed to clean himself off. Those are the things that are happening. And so, you know, I understand that you have a hardline position on immigration and it's important to you. And I understand that. I don't agree with it, but I understand that's the case. But, you know, I think especially at this point, you can't really claim the mantle of a popular mandate when you've seen such a backlash against what all of this looks like. So
conceptually, okay, but sit with that conceptually. So then when Biden is unpopular, I should be able to demand that he stop. He's not going to stop. Like, that's not how government by poll fiat works.
Again,
like,
I mean, again, here's the thing though, is like,
then we would just have 3-month, policy cycles. It doesn't work that way. The system is literally designed so that you can get elected and then you can do something about it. And in 4 years, people will get to vote and they can choose what road that they want to go down.
The nature of what the something is does kind of matter. You know, if you're going to like, okay, we're going to beef up the FBI and we're going to do investigations into, you know, criminal undocumented networks and we're going to have these cases and we're going to take them down. In fact, what we've seen the opposite is him like making deals with Bukele to let down a bunch of gang leaders. Like, that's the reality of what's going on here. And we're going to go after the person who actually was going to their court hearing and is following the process. And we're just going to snatch them up, or we're going to take you because we don't like what you said about Charlie Kirk or what you said about Palestine, or just because you happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, they truly are, you know, wreaking havoc in these communities. So when you talk about...
So I'll give you the Charlie Kirk thing is a perfect example. I know you guys are going to cover it on the Friday show, but for me, one of those guys, so conceptually, I have to be like, okay, this is a free speech problem.
Yeah.
One of those guys, though, he talked about white trash people. One of the people who posted that.
Okay.
And I go, you know what, man? Fuck you. Why are you in our country and you're insulting our own citizens? That's where I guess liberals just don't have that in them. It's like, you come here and you're going to insult the people who live here? Go fuck yourself. Get the fuck out of here.
There's a difference between your emotional reaction and your intellectual understanding of the way that is an infringement on people's First Amendment rights. And yes, immigrants do have free speech rights as well, but we've also seen the way that this government does not keep these infringements just with the immigrant community.
I'm giving you the example because let's take a poll, shall we, since we're so interested in polling. Should people who think that white people who live in our country are white trash be allowed to live here? Most people say no.
There's a lot of people here in this country already who think that white people, like that there's, you know, poor people are white trash. And guess what?
I really object
it's offensive.
To that, though.
But Saagar, you know, in other instances, like you're offensive speech, whatever, like stop pearl clutching. You know, the point of the point of First Amendment speech is like it protects you when things are offensive.
If you say that, I'm not going to say you should be kicked out of the country. It's a choice to let somebody in.
The reason that we have those rights is because there are going to be instances where the majority is opposed, right? But we don't want to deny people their rights just based on like a mob mentality in the moment of what we emotionally feel. So, you know, that's why these fights can be difficult but are important. But, you know, if you don't mind, I would like to show some of the, you know, some of what's going on in Chicago because I think like this is potentially, there is more and more backlash. Chicago seems to be the hottest at this point. There's more and more backlash just from the community to what's going on in Chicago. And so let me show you this one instance that really turned into, you know, quite a, you know, hot situation. Let's show E3, please. So here you can see a white vehicle, that's the ICE vehicle, ramming this red vehicle in a community in a, you know, random neighborhood in Chicago. And then they get out and they make chase, and allegedly these 3 people that they make chase of are undocumented. And then you have people from the community, and we can put E4 up on the screen. Hundreds of people come out of their houses because this accident has just happened because, you know, ICE rammed this vehicle. Hundreds of people come out and it turns into, you know, a chaotic situation. So this is from the Chicago Sun-Times. New York Times covered it as well, other outlets too. They said feds ram SUV after chase down residential street in Chicago, then tear gas the crowd. And we can show some of what this looks like. This is E5. We can put this up on the screen. So this is, again, similar to the one we covered before. I think what's important, E5, guys, go ahead and put up the VO. I think what's important here to realize is this was not like an organized protest. These are just random community people. And maybe there were some activists who, after this all starts to unfold, come to the scene. You've got elderly people. There were, you know, was at least one like baby in the crowd. And then what they say is that people start throwing stuff and they started tear gassing, they've been using tear gas quite indiscriminately around schools. We saw the pastor who was tear gassed, and Chicago PD, who had shown up to try to de-escalate here and separate the crowd from the federal agents. They actually got tear gassed in this as well. You had one person with like a baby in a carrier has to run away, and tear gas is very particularly dangerous for children in particular. And there's a couple key things that I want to point out here, just again on the theme of like, you cannot trust what this government is telling you. They initially said that the immigrants had rammed the ICE agents. You can see from the video, they are the ones who intentionally caused this accident. This is apparently a law enforcement tactic. I wasn't familiar with this, but a law enforcement tactic to stop vehicles. And it's banned by most police departments because it's extremely dangerous and has caused a lot of fatal accidents. So they're executing this extremely dangerous maneuver. Then they lie about it. And then even they arrested a few of the people that had gathered there. And they said that they had, assaulted the officer and throwing things at them, et cetera. But then they also released them without charges. So, we've had other instances where they claimed this woman that they shot, they said, oh, she had a semi-automatic weapon and, she was trying to threaten us, et cetera. And that turned out to not be accurate as well. So they also have just been caught in a number of instances where they will just lie about the scene and the way things ultimately unfold.
I'm really not denying any of this. I'm not saying they haven't lied. Have you noticed me defending the government since CCOT? Okay, all right. Since we saw that the most of the people who said were gang members, I'm not sitting here saying that the apartment building was full of Tren de Aragua. I don't believe them either. Okay.
Yeah.
Trisha McLaughlin, most of the time, she doesn't tell the truth from what I can tell. She's the lady who's the Department of Homeland Security spokesperson. A number of her stories have collapsed. I am not denying it whatsoever. I will say this kind of gets to our earlier debate or whatever about Chicago. I mean, everyone's focused on who's bringing a baby to a protest? I mean, it seems a little bit crazy, don't you think?
Well, I don't.
And it's like
we don't actually know the circumstance because this just like unfolded in this community.
So you're gonna bring? I mean, I have a baby.
I don't know.
I'm not taking her to any
protest. They may have been in the area, and the traffic was stopped. So I'm not sure why there was.
Okay, but implicit in what you said gets to they shouldn't fire tear gas if there's a baby around. I remember. This is the problem. I've covered this shit for so long. I remember when illegals would bring their kids to the border, and then people would get upset whenever they would get interdicted, and they go, "What does that incentive say? Bring your kids. Bring your kids with you, and you can't do anything about it." I'm just so sick of this emotional blackmail.
But do you think that the use of tear gas has been appropriate?
I mean, I don't know on a case-by-case basis, and this is really more belies the point broadly about everything. It seems to be framed, in my opinion, at least, as these people should just be allowed to live here. And it seems, in general, having covered this again for over a decade, what possible enforcement is acceptable to the liberal conscience? Basically nothing. Remain in Mexico was cruel. Then we let them come in here. The only acceptable solution, if you keep them in prison, oh no, that's cruel too. So they need a work visa. They need to be able to go around here. If they skip their asylum, oh, those poor people, they skipped their hearing, even though they did it, it would be cruel to go and get them. So do you see how the permission structure has risen? Well, and anytime a liberal mob creates violence, riot is a voice of the unheard, and they don't deserve to be prosecuted.
But Saagar,
and everything they've done is fine.
In Chicago and in Portland, like LA, you could make, there was a hot protest before the National Guard surged in, but Chicago was a lot more peaceful before these people showed up. Chicago was much more peaceful. There were not riots. There were not even major protests. And so, if your concern is a lack of chaos and law and order, this is the exact opposite of what you would ultimately want.
And so,
and I reject. I just think it's such a straw man to say, well, you wouldn't want any enforcement. It's like, okay, well, we could argue about what would be appropriate, but can we all say that this is not appropriate, that this is not an acceptable way to go about it? We've got this Walgreens, chasing people down in Walgreens and throwing them on the ground who are U.S. citizens just because they happen to, be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, can we say that masked,
I can say that,
kitted out military officers roaming the streets and terrorizing random people and crashing into cars and shooting people, that this is not the way to do it? Like, And then we can talk about what would be the right way to do it. But I don't think it should be so hard to say this is not acceptable, and that this is an issue not just for immigrants, but again, for all of us and for these communities in particular being impacted. And it's not a one-off. This is part of a plan. This is what they want to do. And they're expanding this to other cities because this is, part of their project of consolidating control and scaring people, basically.
Yeah, so I can easily say, just like you did about criminals, like, yes, I think it's bad. I'm merely pointing out that at every level of enforcement is cruel and unusual. The only acceptable thing.
I just don't know why you have to dodge like why.
But
do
it's
you
not
have,
a dodge.
It is, of course it is.
Yeah, I'm trying to put you into the personality and the mind of people who share my politics or are currently in the government. Okay, I'm not even necessarily justifying it. I'm explaining to you how it happened and how it's a serious political constituency. Actually, that's why they don't give a shit about whenever they see these videos. Remain in Mexico was cruel. Then whenever you're there, come over here and you put them in prison, that's cruel too. The only acceptable solution is to let them loose, give them a work visa. If you go and get them in any criminal way, it's cruel. It's fascism. And so you see the rhetorical ladder that we start to climb up here, and then when you violently riot across the country,
actual fascism, though,
okay,
we should be able to say this is not acceptable. And regardless of what the libs did that you didn't like, they are grown-ups who have a lot of power and control. And by the way, Stephen Miller is running this, and he's a total sadistic psycho who even Trump says is like wild white nationalist. And he's in control of this.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it would matter what the libs did because
okay.
he has an ideological project that he has been trying to effectuate his entire life. So I don't know that the libs are really to blame for the existence of Stephen Miller.
Well, actually, he's from California and he was radicalized by illegal politics, so I will say that. But actually, if you take it a little bit further, I don't know. I just think that your desire to try and talk about this in a vacuum, in the same way that if I were to try and talk about every illegal immigrant who raped somebody in a vacuum, ignores very important political context. On the political violence and chaos front, everything was fine with it when people were burning, rioting, and looting. That was all, MLK quotes galore. And even on the Charlie Kirk thing, I was thinking about this earlier, when everyone was like, oh, it's bad that we're being forced to mourn. How many times do I have to walk past George Floyd's face and have crowds of people tell me I have to kneel for 8 minutes and whatever seconds? They had no problem with state mourning demanding me and my life and everybody around me. Like, do you see how that's going to drive people to a very, very different place whenever you have that level of cultural and governmental, like actual trying to control of your life for over a decade? And then same on the immigration question, where every time they try to do something about it, you're called Nazi and fascist. Some of them are just going to say, fuck it, let's go. And that's part of what, I do think that bears responsibility because things don't happen in a vacuum.
Okay, but your personal agency talk, like normally you're so fast to ascribe people personal agency. Where is it for these people?
Oh, I said it's bad. I mean, absolutely.
It's always got to be couched in, but the libs, but BLM, but Gavin Newsom, but this. And it's like, why can't you ascribe the same level of personal agency to these very powerful individuals who have put extensive plans in place? And who, you're right, I do think we shouldn't talk about this in the vacuum. I think we should talk about it as part of an effort at totalitarian control and achieving a one-party state. Now, you may think that they're too incompetent to be able to pull that off. That may be the case. But that is, in fact, what they're trying to pull off. And so that's the other part of this that, I think needs to be brought into the picture, is that the National Guard surge and all of the federal agents, in some ways the other federal agencies, because they're able to do more, are more of a threat into these cities. The militarization of regular law enforcement. This is part of a broader plan that is being effectuated by this government. And I really don't give a shit at this point what Joe Biden did or what some liberal did in 2018 that you were unhappy about, because these are the people who have power now. And I don't know why we can't just deal with the current existing threat. And then, yes, we can talk about the root cause. We can think about how to go in a different direction that's going to create an immigration solution that's more palatable for people so we don't end up in the extremes. I am down with all of that. But at the moment, the thing that we need to focus on is what's happening right now with this government, what they're doing and what their plans are.
I have no problem with it. And we just did, right? We focused on it for certain, even with the National Guard and all that. But, I don't think, frankly, saying a totalitarian one-party state is happening is all that useful whenever we live here in Washington, D.C. You and I are, recording just fine. There's a bunch of idiots who are picking up trash down at I didn't mean that, but I mean the people who are commanding them. The people who are idiots who put them in charge of picking up trash. yes, who are walking around with it. So the bifurcation of the reality and then the, the reality of what's actually happening. And then, yes, the deployment in some cases seems like important context to me. Like nobody, listen, if they seize the ballot boxes, or what did Michael Moore once say on our show? That if they're going to go and seize the ballot boxes and unironically rig the election, I'm with you. I'll even promise you I will take to the streets.
But
for real, I actually will.
Something short of that's also
But
concerning.
like what? I mean, well, like we're about to argue about the VRA. It's like, yeah, you don't like that it's going to get struck down by Supreme Court. Sorry, that's within the political mechanism.
Okay,
that's not fascism.
How about trying to criminalize dissenting from Trump at all, like using the IRS? They're targeting, so they've pulled the funding from blue states during the shutdown, again, to try to cripple any sort of democratic dissent and governance, chilling speech, policing comedians' monologues, right? Making it so that you can't be here if you don't like Charlie Kirk.
I mean, I objected to some of that you're listening, but look, even on the Democrat
again,
nobody wants to hear this. Obama actually set that up under the 2013 shutdown. The executive branch's ability to pull funding and to, at the total discretion, to distribute funds from which he wants to.
Has anyone ever denied red state funding? No.
Yeah, you're right.
Right. And so at a certain, where is the line for you? Does it really have to be they seize the ballot boxes? Like, it has to go that far before you see the way the country is being, the rights that we've enjoyed are being taken away, and it's being turned and weaponized. And they are, again, whether or not they can succeed, it's very clear what the plan is. The plan is we want to make it so there basically is no opposition, so that we have control, so that they can't win the House, so that they want to go after Act Blue, so that, any sort of fundraising is very difficult for Democrats. They want to go after individual donors so that you're too scared to give your money to Democratic causes. That is the plan. And that they also want to change the composition of the electorate, so that, the people that vote for them, they're changing the asylum refugee program to favor right-wingers coming from Europe.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, these are all,
listen,
again,
I'm with you. I think that's nuts.
This is all part and parcel of the same plan. So I know it sounds wild to say, but that is in fact, so you don't think that's Stephen Miller's goal? Of course it is.
No, I genuinely don't. I actually think it's politics, and I think that seems to be our fundamental disagreement. And in some cases—
You don't think he's an ideological actor?
No, I said he's an ideological actor. I didn't think that his plan is a totalitarian one-party state. I genuinely don't, and that seems to be the premise of our disagreement. In some cases, what you're talking about is that many liberals are so accustomed, let's say, on the nonprofit status. It's like, well, yeah, it is. I'm not defending per se in the way the Trump administration is going to do it, but let's be honest, is it not also been a fantasy, to investigate the Koch brothers or to go into look into right-wing Tea Party funding network? This is a long time normalized rhetoric in terms of Democratic administrations.
No,
if they weren't,
not.
No, absolutely,
it's not.
No, it absolutely is in terms of their.
When has anyone said that we should criminalize Republican donors?
Well, no, okay, I don't think they said criminalize Republican donors, but they said that they flirt with the. I actually even agree in terms of, let's say, in churches or in terms of their political activity. I'm just saying though, if you look at it, in some cases, all Trump does is say all Trump really does in some cases is say the quietest part out loud for much of the way that the political system has acted. There's legitimate, but see, this just seems to be our core, I guess, disagreement here. In everything you interpret as a genuine crushing, what would it take for me to say, yeah, this is it? Yes, unironically, rigging the election, actually rigging straight up the election or stopping the election or seizing ballot boxes. Within that, considering how much U.S. history and all that I've read, it's pretty within the confines.
As long as there's a theoretical trappings of some bullshit elections, then anything else is fine.
But then,
because think about it,
what's not bullshit or not?
I know you don't like Comey or Tish James or Adam Schiff. I like Letitia James. The other two I don't care for. But now we've got, the DOJ is going to be my personal hit squad. I'm going to go out. I'm going to gin up charges against whoever I want to. I'm going to target. So you've got the DOJ acting that way. You have funds withheld from blue states. It is an all-out war on the opposition. That's what it is. And in a way that is truly different. And yes, some Democrat might have said something or the other. We have never seen in our lifetimes the complete weaponization of government against not just political elites, but against the entire constituency of the opposition party. And that is what they're doing and what they have plans to expand.
So we have David Stroder standing by, so this will be my last word. But my point, so you choose to see that. What I choose to see is a federal grand jury throwing out the ham sandwich thing, making sure, or saying the Chicago jury saying that much of what ICE is saying is bullshit. The Los Angeles jury throwing that out. I'm like, that is still within the confines of the system. That's not a theoretical election. That's actually legal justification. By the way, James Comey's being tried in this place where I live. I can guarantee you he's being found not guilty, 100%. Now, I mean, that doesn't say that he hasn't been harassed by the state. So I'm not going to diminish that that's really, really bad, right? Okay? But that's not the same thing as being thrown into CCOT without due process. Yes, a multimillionaire.
They also did.
Okay, well, they're all really, but it's not the same thing though. It's actually not. Is if a multimillionaire can contest his defense and then can get released on bond and also be found not guilty, you don't live in fascist dictatorship.
I mean, you know that the point of that is not just about Comey. The point of that is that Trump's enemies, anyone who would speak out against him, are put on notice. We will do this to you. That's the point of those actions. It's the same thing. I mean, we objected vociferously to when like a tax auditor or whatever showed up at Matt Taibbi's house after a report on the Twitter files, right?
Yes.
And this is being done, you know, and that, I don't, you know, was it legitimate or not? We certainly were very uncomfortable with that. Now this is being done explicitly in a whole of government way. So I would just say that I see your ham sandwich grand jury and I raise you a Supreme Court that's allowing things like Kavanaugh stops, that's allowing rescissions, that's allowing the complete, you know, destruction of government agencies, that's allowing this administration to do whatever they want, because that is a much more powerful institution than, you know, one or two grand juries here or there that, you know, check some of the abuses.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, again, based on your rescissions thing, it's kind of baked in is that you agree with the race thing. So we'll just put that to the side because we're going to talk about it.
Rescissions, I'm talking about the funding.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Rescission with the funding. Okay, so within that, let's say that on the front of where you think that things are going to go the worst, because I would say that the worst of it, the true totalitarianism means that dissent itself does not exist, is that criminalization has no pretense in the legal or the judicial system. I just don't see it. I mean, I definitely do think that Trump has an enemies list. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. I agree. But it's a big difference, again, in my opinion, between that and actually being thrown in jail, no pretense, you know, so show trial, like in Moscow or something like that. I would say similarly with the Supreme Court, Kavanaugh stuff. You can agree with it. There's a lot of shit the Supreme Court that does that I disagree with. But that's not the same thing as saying that it was declared by executive fiat. Some of the rescissions have not been held up. You know, Lisa Cook is still on the Federal Reserve Board. Like, it's not exactly like it's 100% of what you want, maybe a lot more than you would like, but that's very different in terms of how the system is operating. And that's part of why I'm like, yeah, I just think it's generally, I would say it's out of the confines of modern history, definitely not out of the confines of American history. And that's part of why I look at all this, in particular pair it with some of the things that we've all gone through. And I was like, yes, Trump is extraordinary to the current mind. And I don't defend or even frankly like, I would say almost 80% of a lot of what the White House has done. I think it's grotesque. I think it has betrayed much of the spirit of what people voted on. And in fact, I think what disgusts me the most really about it is a lot of the lying is because, you know, it's not just Trump. Of course, Trump was a liar, but the people around him actually made assurances both privately but also really publicly about the way things were going to go. And then to flip on a dime like that, I am much more concerned at a democratic level with that. And because I don't see that the voters, I mean, you know, I'm a rare exception. There's most people who are just going to go along with everything. And that actually probably scares me. Maybe equally to what you are, because it shows me that the stuff itself doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
And I think, see, you talk about fake elections, that's what I think is fake, is that the mind is so controlled by so many of these people with a cult of personality that you can literally flip on something that you said that you were going to do, and they're going to do anything about it or create any sort of democratic check. So in a way, I view that as one of the more dangerous elements of MAGA. But we've talked for so long.
Sorry,
I apologize to the audience and to David Sirota. So let's go ahead and get him in here. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.